why is there no fun in the learning process? They loved the actual instrument, but they didn't like the process of acquiring that knowledge.
Emphasize the turning point when you realize traditional music education wasn't working.
It was a very gradual process, you know. You can tell the narrative any way you want, but ultimately it was a bunch of small understandings that occurred to me throughout the journey that ended up with me co-founding MuseFlow.
How does MuseFlow ensure that the emotional and human side of music is alive in this, automation, AI, and technology?
We definitely do not believe that technology is going to replace the human teacher anytime soon. We also don't want that, because why do we play music? We play music so that we can become connected closer to each other or to our source of truth. Make sure that technology is there so that you can achieve your goal better.
My guest today is Patrick Boylan, a gifted multi-instrumentalist, composer and co-founder of MuseFlow, the groundbreaking music learning platform often described as the Duolingo of music education. Welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues. I'm your host, Ali Horiat. My goal in this program is to educate our audience about various global issues and how we can help. After 8 years of traditional piano lessons left him uninspired, Patrick taught himself through curiosity and experimentation, eventually developing a system that combines neuroscience, flow psychology, and gamified learning to help anyone read and play music with precision, but also with the joy that brings people to want to play music in the first place. His work represents not only a revolution in how we learn music, but also a reimagining of how creativity itself can activate social progress. Hello, Patrick, and welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I love musicians here. Your journey from an uninspired piano student to co-founding of a music education startup is a remarkable journey. We're going to get into that in a minute. When you tell that story, I want to emphasize the turning point when you realize traditional music education wasn't working. And I guess that's the Eureka moment that sparked this innovation of MuseFlow. So let's get into how it all came to be and then that explosion.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a very gradual process, you know. You can tell the narrative any way you want, but ultimately it was a bunch of small understandings that occurred to me throughout the journey that ultimately ended up with me co-founding MuseFlow. First one was right when I started getting into piano lessons. I just did not like it. I didn't enjoy it. Did you ever take lessons? Did you ever take music lessons?
Yes, I did. I that's why I like speaking to you about this, because I went and checked out MuseFlow and everything else, and I was like, ooh, okay, because I did take those lessons where you had to know your C and your F and everything else, and put your finger on and click, and you weren't really inspired, or it was so much memorization and so much repetition, and,
right?
Yeah, and you never really understood the sound and the music and just the vibrancy of it and the frequency, nothing like that. It was just press C, press it longer, press it, count till 3 when you press it, count till 2 when you press it, and it was just boring. Yeah, exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And the terrible songs that we had to learn, they were so boring, and some of them were oddly racist, and you're like, what is happening here? This is this pedagogy was created in the 1930s and has never changed. Right. And the general way that we've learned how to play instruments hasn't changed for thousands of years. It's been the same way for thousands of years. And there's an 85% drop off of people after high school not playing their instruments at all. I have friends like this. We were in choir together. We were in a band together, and I kept playing, but they didn't. They just stopped. And it blew my mind. I was like, why? You know, I didn't like lessons because of the repetition of the same music over and over and over.
Mm.
It was having to learn songs by rote and then never really understanding the fundamental thing that you're supposed to be exercising within that song, right? Whether that's a new note or a new rhythm. I never learned it outside the context of that one specific song. So it wasn't cumulative skill building at that point. It was just learning isolated songs after another. Is that kind of what you felt too? Or
Yeah, and when you're saying this, I remember, for example, Fur Elise is a song everybody learns on piano in the beginning, right? And you're like,
right.
you don't listen to any of that sort of music. You could be, I don't know, in the 80s, you could be a Guns N' Roses fan, right? A big metal age at that time. And you look at the piano, you're like, I can't play any of that here. That doesn't resonate with my desires for music and sound and stuff. So as a child, like you said, the reason why a lot of people drop off is as a child, your parents, they're dragging you to these places or they're bribing you into learning your piano. It's you do piano, you'll get an hour of, Atari or whatever.
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
Right? It was like that, right? It was like that. You practice your piano and you get this. You're like, okay, fine. For that, I'll do the piano.
See,
but it was
that's
never
interesting.
because you loved it, right? And so, but you did love the music. Like you did want to be able, even in guitar and other things, not just piano. I mean, again, going to the Guns N' Roses example, everybody wanted to be Slash at some point in the 80s, but
right.
when you went to learn the guitar, it was not that music. You're like, can you, teach me the opening riff of Welcome to the Jungle? No, you have to learn this first, click, click, click. And so.
Yep. I know exactly what you mean. Mine was not positive reinforcement. Mine was negative reinforcement. They grounded me. They grounded me if I didn't practice. They were, you have to stay in this weekend to practice piano. And I'm like, gosh darn it, man. I wanted to go hang out outside. And no, I had to stay inside and play piano because my parents made me. Because I wasn't doing it or just organically. I wasn't having fun.
Right.
I was not motivated to do it. Because I was repeating the same things over and over and over. So not really fun, not really
And you
flow.
know what? For the parents, it's beautiful that you want to get your child into, some artistic, musical flow and get that going and stuff. But it's like, and you said something really interesting in the beginning. You talked about the historical aspect of this. Yes, in 100 years ago, 300 years ago, it was kind of oppressive in the sense that, you had to learn the piano because it was good for you. When you grow up, you'll appreciate this, right? It was never about the first 10 years of, like you said, getting grounded and possibly, 100, 150 years ago, even getting a beating for not, playing the piano right. And then all of a sudden you're expected at, 17 to fall in love. And now that you have mastered the piano, you're like, okay, now I can enjoy it. But those 10 years, and it's not just in music. I mean, even in sports or even in acting or even in many other fields, like you see child actors and they're not actually enjoying what they're doing. They're really forced into, doing those commercials and doing the 10 takes over and over until they get that right bounce in the commercial and everything else. And people aren't in the business. They're not in the field. So they don't really understand what you're talking about and how this flowed to, trying to save people from this historic oppression that's been going on for centuries now.
Ain't that the truth? And so I thought, why is there no fun in the learning process? You know what people actually cited for their drop off? They stopped playing piano after high school. Do you know what they cited as the reasons for it? They cited them being frustrated with the way that they're being taught or boredom with the way that they were being taught, specifically the way they were being taught. Not that they were frustrated with the actual playing itself. No, they loved the actual instrument. They loved, doing the instrument, but they didn't like the process of acquiring that knowledge. And so that got me thinking, well, what if there's another way? And so after 8 years of lessons, I stopped. My teacher retired. No fault of my own. I was a terrible student, but he just retired. And I then went back to my parents' sheet music. They had a lot of musical theater scores that they had in their house. They were both actors back in the day and singers and musical theater nerds. And so they had a lot of scores. I went back there and I picked up some of their scores and I was like, I'm going to learn every single note verbatim in this score. And so I sat down and I plunked it out, right? I just started playing from the beginning. I got maybe like 15, 20 measures into the song. And I ended up finding something that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed playing, whether that was the sound of it or I really enjoyed the pattern on my hands. Like I very much enjoyed the kinesthetic, activity of playing this one little passage. And so I stopped going through the song at that point. I just repeated that one little phrase over and over and over, putting it inside of all these different contexts. I put it in the right hand and then with accompaniment on the left. I put it in the left hand with accompaniment on the right. I flipped it upside down. I inverted it. I played it backwards. I put it in a different key. I put it in a different time signature. I put it in a different tempo. I really messed with it and I played it and I was continuously just iterating on this phrase, putting it in all these different contexts. And I was like, wow, that was actually really fun. Let me keep doing that. And so I kept going through the score and I found another phrase that I really liked. And I started doing that with that. And over and over and over, just kept grabbing these little tiny, minute, micro skills, these little phrases, little ditties, little patterns. Cut to college, I was the only acting major that could play piano. And all the musical theater students were coming up to me being like, Pat, I want to learn this song. I want to play this song. Can you accompany me? And I'm like, sure. Throw it in front of me. Let's see. So I was at the piano and I brought him into a practice room and we tried some stuff, right? They threw the music in front of me. I'd never seen the song before. And I started playing it and they started singing and I kept playing it and they started singing. And I'm like, how can I play this song? I've never seen it before. What's happening here? And then I realized that the reason why I could play those songs so well was because of what I was doing, my personalized practice that I was doing after the lessons. These little chunks were the core building blocks of musical theater, the genre. I had been iterating on the core building blocks of that genre for years. Just taking little chunks out and improvising around them and then really learning that little specific core phrase outside the context of one specific song so that when I saw that little core phrase replicated in another song, I could then play it. It blew my mind. I was like, so I could sight read musical theater. At that point, I've gotten better since. I can sight read a fewer other genres as well, but musical theater is really the thing that was kind of what piqued my mind here of like, well, maybe there is a different way of learning that might be more fun and more effective, And so that's ultimately what MuseFlow is kind of based off of. It is taking the core fundamentals, a new note, a new rhythm, a new time signature, and putting them into all of these different contexts and really fleshing it out outside the context of songs. Instead, we're giving you music you've never seen before, and it never repeats. It constantly is flowing so that you're learning that skill outside of the context of one specific song so that when you see it in a song, you then can replicate it. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm starting to think about flow states because what you're talking about is sight reading and flow and, turning skill building into, I guess, an interactive or engaging process, right? That's what's happening here. So, that it becomes a mental space between not the problem, but the challenge, and kind of, being able to master that in a sense. So, essentially that's the transformation in what you're doing is using that flow state and people's mastery of it to replicate that when they see it or to understand it and play it when they see it. Right?
I don't think we actually really recognize that flow state was a part of it. we didn't even know what that term was until we started developing the actual curriculum itself. So the way it happened was I was here.
So
I
that
was
came
out
through
here.
the science, basically.
Exactly. In a way,
Okay.
it's kind of this retroactive thing of like, you build the thing and then you realize what the thing actually does. You know, that's kind of how it happened for us. We were like, well, why does this work so well? Why does it work? Oh, it's because we're actually allowing students to tap into flow state. Oh, whoa, let's read up on flow state. Okay. And then I learned a ton about flow state, and I recognized that, yeah, the science backs up a process like this. It really does. Usually they talk about flow state in terms of performance, like a sportsman playing football or a musician playing professional like music. They can fall into flow state by just having that slight challenge that is just right outside of their comfort zone that gets them into that flow state. But we realized that we were getting people into flow state during the learning process, during the skill acquisition process, which is definitely unique. People try to do that with gamification all the time. They try to get you into that flow state by having you reach for an external motivator like a star or a badge or something like that, right? But instead, I don't think that's super effective. I think you want the motivation to be internal if you want them to get into flow state. You need them to the actual acquisition of the skill itself is the motivator, not the external factor. And so we kind of recognized that we were doing that. We were actually engaging them in flow state by saying, here's your goalpost. You need to learn this one specific note or a specific pitch or a specific duration or a specific rhythm. Learn that. And if you can play music that uses that skill at 95% accuracy at the goal tempo, if you can play that for 4 phrases in a row, which are for a phrase for us is 4 measures long. If you can play 4, 8, 12, 16 measures in a row at 95% accuracy, you have successfully acquired that skill, in our opinion. And so the goal here, right? The goalpost is always set. We're not moving the goalpost. It's always going to be there. Play 4 phrases in a row at 95% accuracy at the goal tempo. Then if you can do that, you will succeed. You will pass that level. Anyway, nobody really thought about it in terms of education before. And so I was like, that's actually really, really cool for me. You know, I find that fascinating, you know, that because flow state is such a prized thing. It really is. Do you know much about flow state?
Yes, that's really a little bit of what got me interested, because like you said, you know, in sports or even in meditation, right? I mean, that's really what you're trying to get into. And so you think about, you know, I traveled quite extensively, and I realized a lot of meditation in different parts of the world happened with music. And the reason it happens with music is because that is the way you get into your flow state, because exactly what you just said, without originally knowing that you said it, replicating what's been done for centuries or even, you know, millennia. And this intersection of the science, or the neuroscience to be specific, and the education which you just mentioned, and the discovery and the creativity to, you know, in an ancient time, understand this without really knowing the neuroscience, is what you've done is you've essentially brought all of this full circle, and you said, hey, this is what they used to do to understand it, and this is how they taught it, and this is how we implement it by the science of it. And look, I've designed it, and now you all can learn from it. But I think until you understand all of those things as well, it's really difficult to understand what MuseFlow is. So maybe I understand it well because, you know, I speak the languages you speak, for example, you know, in music and in other forms. And then I'm amazed. I'm like, wow, this is genius. But nobody's ever done it. I'm so shocked because it feels so natural all of a sudden when you hear about it, right? But until somebody does it and presents it, it's like nobody's ever thought about it, which is the genius of what you've done with MuseFlow.
Well, people have
Did you
thought about
know?
it.
Did you?
Pe-
Yeah, but
pe- they have,
I've
but
never
they've never been
seen
able to
this in
do
this.
it. They've never been
Yeah,
able to
that's what I
do
mean.
it because of well, we use technology.
Mm-hmm.
And music education has been marred in tradition for thousands of years, and they've been doing it the same way, which is through sheet music, through
Right.
music right in front of you, and you're playing that off of a paper. We've included a lot of new technology into MuseFlow, and that's the only reason why we could actually do this. Using a game engine called Phaser and using an app called React and putting those
Mm-hmm.
two on top of each other and allowing for interactive components with inside of an app and real-time feedback, the most nuanced real-time feedback you get in any app. We care
Mm-hmm.
about duration. That is, not a lot of apps actually care about duration, which is, are you holding the note down for long enough, right?
Right.
Nobody really, the metrics aren't there. Nobody does that, but we figured out how. And then, of course, the music, the infinite music that is generated so that you could play it in this outside the context of songs, that you could learn that one specific skill outside the context of songs. Yeah, all of this is only possible with the advent of technology.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And so when did that really happen? 1990s. But when did even stuff like this occur? This was like the stuff that we're using 10 years old at most, at most. And so we're kind of right on the cusp there. And I understand why this sort of pedagogy, why this type of methodology of learning and skill acquisition for musical instruments, why that hasn't been around since the beginning. I get it, because you can't really have an infinite amount of sheet music at a very specific level. You can't. It would always be finite. If you have the music in front of you, you're always going to come to the end. But with us and the way we do it, you don't. So I understand that maybe it needed to be changed much earlier, to allow more people to enjoy playing an instrument. But we realize that, you can't really do it without the technology.
Mm-hmm. But it's also doing the technology right, because there are tons of games that rely on kind of just either your reaction time or your memorization process to be able to learn music. So there are these games where the lines drop and you just click 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 and the song. So that's not really learning music. That's just like parroting certain movements that you do over and over again until they become natural to you, or anything like that. And so it's very different than what you're doing, because what you're doing, what that technology using that tech does is just allow you to play those same songs, like you said, repeatedly over and over again at events. It's kind of like what happened when I was 9 years old. Like my mom would say, "Play the piano for the guests," and you go there, and there's the only 3 songs that you've memorized and got punished for or got ice cream for, that you played every time they asked you to play. So it was never a matter of intelligence in music, right? And so I had that same issue when I wanted to, because I create music, I write music, and so
cool.
And there are people in our team at Compassiviste, like we have people who award-winning, people who've made music, and so at the highest levels. And so when we speak, sometimes it's kind of like, it's just repetitive. It's just the same things over. And if you're learning the piano, you're always learning it on classical music of the same genre, of the same people, of the same composers. It's and you grow in your composers as the music evolves into harder play kind of flow. It's not even about the type of music. Like Vivaldi is not as easy to play as, for example, some of Beethoven's pieces. So it's like, okay, we'll start there. Not for any purpose of the type of it. No, just this has been the way the process has gone. So it was always frustrating for me, because you never got to your music. You never got to become one with your piano or with your guitar or with anything. And then you see people who are self-taught. You'll see even some people, and I'll say this: I've met people I've actually stood by at a subway station or something and listened to, some of those people who are just sitting there playing music, and, people throw change and they walk away, and I listen. And then, sometimes it's really beautiful. And I ask them, where'd you learn how to play? And believe me, often it's not in a conservatory, or it's not, I learned when I was growing up at my parents' home or anything like that. It's they learned because they were alone, and their life was in shambles, and they had the guitar, and it was left over by their roommate who left or something. And then somehow they became one with the instrument, and now they feel that music, they understand it. There's all of that flow state comes into play there.
So interesting, right?
Right? There's all of that. And then you're thinking to yourself, when you go here, what you've done with a lot of people say technology, and I'm against this, but a lot of people say technology can make learning more accessible, but it disconnects us from the soul of the art. And I say, and I ask them why, and they always raise the issues they raise. But the thing to me is, how are you distancing someone from achieving mastery in painting or playing an instrument, or even using technology for your golf swing or your tennis forehand or anything like that? If there's something that can show you what you did wrong in that swing, or whether you ended up here or down here, which is why the ball's going in the net all the time, and if that's happening,
Totally.
you can kind of use technology to the advantage, and so. For the traditionalists, I want you to explain, how does MuseFlow ensure that the emotional and human side of music is alive in this, automation, AI, and technology system, so that we can still appreciate flow state and, sight reading by the use of technology? Because traditionalists will say, no, you need that human component, you need the teacher to move your hands for you, but that's not true anymore. Technology tells you that's not true.
We definitely do not believe that technology is going to replace the human teacher anytime soon. We also don't want that, because humanity, why do we play music, right? We play music so that we can become connected closer to each other, or to our source of truth, whether that's a God or our spiritual side, whatever it may be, right? We do it so that we can connect. And I do think that a lot of AI these days are really removing the soul of the thing that they're creating. You look at an image of a person that an AI has created, and you look into the eyes and they're dead. You don't see a soul. So AI can't replicate the soul. I totally agree with that statement. But I do think that the use of technology just in general does not, I don't think it removes the soul of the thing. You just kind of have to make sure that the soul stays intact, or that always make sure that that is kind of your end goal while using technology, incorporating technology to either expedite the process, or to make the process more fun and engaging, or to gamify the process, however you want to do it, right? Make sure that technology is there so that you can achieve your goal better. And music performance, that humans are so integral to that process. It's what we call musicianship, okay? Musicianship is, well, how do you want to play it? So you may have that technically proficient. Great. You may be able to play that song perfectly, all right? Let's talk about the humanity side of it all. Let's talk about the why. Let's talk about the how. Why are you playing it like that? Be considered. Take your time. Consider how you're going to play those things. Every single note, every single phrase, and then you look at the piece in general. How do you want to play it? Ask yourself those questions. And then ask yourself why. Why do you want to play that way? Say the song is called Frolicking in the Forest, okay? Frolicking in the forest. And frolicking is this very fun, bouncy sort of activity, in my opinion. You're frolicking, right? Even the word is somewhat onomatopoetic. It's like frolic, right? It's just so bouncy and fun. And so maybe the song is boom, 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 right? It's very frolicky, very frolicky. And so how do you want to play that? Maybe you want to play it, maybe your frolic Your personal frolic is more do, 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 do. But another person's frolic could be do, 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 do. At the end of the day, you get to decide how you want to play it. That may be notated. There may be staccatos. There may be legatos. It might actually tell you exactly how you want to play it. But then you, as the musician, get to interpret those notations. It's the interpretation process that humans are so integral for. And so the goal when it comes to actual traditional music and how we fit into traditional music lessons is, and we have some teachers that use MuseFlow in this regard, they outsource the teaching of technique to MuseFlow. They say, hey, student, go home and learn levels 1 through 4, okay, of MuseFlow. Come back the next week and then look at the songs that get unlocked because that's a part of the app. You play the sight reading trainer, you learn the skill, and then songs get unlocked after that. So each level, specific types, specific songs that get unlocked, they get unlocked after that. And so you're like, cool, okay, great. So you go home as the student, you go home, you practice those, you master those 4 levels. And then you look through all the songs that get unlocked, and then you go back to your teacher, and the teacher says, okay, let's practice those songs now. And let's make decisions on how you're going to play those songs. It reframes the lesson as a coaching session instead of a teacher session, right? We want the dynamic to change between the student and the teacher. We want them to become your friend, to become your coach, your confidant, your advisor for your music lessons. And then they can sit there and say, well, why don't you try playing it this way? Because at that point, at the end of the level, you've mastered that skill, songs that get unlocked. When you're playing those songs, you realize that you're significantly closer to perfecting that song than if you didn't master that level. So they're much closer to your peak of your skill level. They're much closer than, say, if you're a true beginner and you want to learn Guns N' Roses, right? The distance between what you're able to play at first sight and how difficult that song is that you want to play is just, it's astronomically large. So it's insurmountable, that task of trying to play that song, because you don't even know where to start, right? We're getting you up higher, closer. We're getting you able to play stuff at first sight that is much more difficult than doing the traditional lessons with each song, because it's not cumulative. And so, again, back to the whole beginning of this. No, humans are so integral to learning an instrument. And we think that teachers are very, very important, and we're not planning on taking over their jobs. No way. I wouldn't want to. You would lose the humanity. And so those musicianship skills of how and why, asking yourself those questions, your teacher coaching you through different ways of playing a song, and then ultimately codifying it and writing it on the sheet music and mastering it that way. That is so important. And we do not want to lose that when it comes to music performance.
And you know what? I think the people attacking technology are the ones who don't want to adapt to, an increased or higher level of performance. And you see this in all fields. It's not just, here with AI. I mean, look at medicine. There are doctors who get their, degree and a license to practice in 1984, and they've never opened a book or researched medicine since then, because they have a license and no state's going to take that license away unless they do something wrong. And if they're just, not doing anything really drastically wrong, they maintain that and they never advance. And then you've got some other people who are investing the same amount of time year in, year out into their education. And so they're going to be a much better doctor because technology is allowing them to improve their techniques, right? Now, what really also attracted me to the work that you're doing is this. There is a level of activism going on here, for me, at least. Maybe you don't recognize that, but when you said it allows you to frolic the way you understand frolicking, right? Now, let's go back to the Guns N' Roses.
What a sentence right there. That's such a weird
Right.
sentence.
It is.
How do you like to frolic, sir?
Yeah.
How do you?
Yeah. What's your frolic?
Yeah.
And going back to Guns N' Roses, piano again. You're thinking November Rain, that song, and every person can have a different way of connecting to November Rain. Now, if we learn the song traditionally by, sheet music or by memorization, you memorize where your fingers go, and you're so good at the memorization and the parroting. You've done it so many times that you even know how long to keep your finger and how hard to hit the key. And so you do it perfectly. You will never be able to put your own emotion into it. So there's no liberty. There's no freedom. There's no inclusivity. There's no culture. There's no ability. There's no age. All of those go out the window because you're only replicating. So you playing this is probably less intense for you emotionally than hearing it played on whatever stereo you're listening to, because there you can kind of go into that flow state of your own and imagine your November Rain, your song, your issue, because you have that freedom. But here you're memorized, right? So you're always trying to react to what do I do next? I press here, then I press here, then you have no moment to go into your space. So you have no freedom. You're a prisoner. You're a slave to the song. What you've done is given people this freedom to make the song theirs. And so we see this a lot with vocals. Why do people have different covers of, many songs? And they sing it differently because they're able to do that more readily or more easily, especially with the technology that is available today, than it is for them to understand music in their own way. Only those who have reached a level of, mastering that instrument can really turn that into their own. In which case they're doing exactly what you're saying or what you've provided with MuseFlow. They are creating their own aura in the music, their own stamp on the music, essentially, their own spirituality on the music, their own life storytelling, everything. Their DNA is going through that song, right? Yes. So that's one part of something I think is beautiful that you're doing. It's not something new. It's not that nobody's thought about this before, but it's the genius of actually doing it in a way that people can start learning this way, as opposed to the traditional setting of learning music or learning an instrument for the purpose of replaying songs that they have learned to play. Many people, again, they'll stop at a train station or in a mall or at the airport lounges, and you'll see an instrument and you'll go sit on the piano and you'll play Für Elise over and over again in 8 different airports. Why? Because that's what you learn how to play. You've never gone to the stage of really expressing yourself through the song. Right. And so I love that part. And more importantly, I think it becomes a tool for healing, for empathy, and even for connecting, which becomes activism, right? When you're using music to connect and whether violent or non-violent or cultish or not, or whatever you may call it, a lot of it was music that really put together the protests of, say, the 70s in the US and the 60s to the 70s and really changed the course of public discourse in the US and foreign policy. People don't remember that. People don't, or it was music. It was, Bob Dylan singing a song for so long about a boxer and what happened to him and everything else that made people know that story. Before that, it was just, a local area that were like, oh, this poor guy, he got wrongly, convicted. But now the whole globe knows this activist story through music. But his music is his own. It's not sheet music, right? It's not replay. It's not, let me play a few Mozarts and a few this and a few that and put it together in an album and give it to you. No. It's my music. You can only do that when you really get into that level of understanding how you connect through learning through this technological, way that you're providing an easier methodology to kind of retain that music and to make it your own and to be able to go that one step further from just being a parrot, playing musical instruments to really creating your own music. So
Yeah.
Did you think about all of this when you were building this, or did it just did it appear to you as it happened?
It was kind of like, it was the latter for sure. It was appearing as it happened. Me and my co-founder, Steven, we sat down. I brought this idea to him and I was like, hey, what do you think about like learning the individual notes and the individual rhythms and the core fundamentals through sight reading? And what do you think about that? Like and we gamify it a little bit, 95% accuracy over the course of 4 phrases at the goal tempo. And what do you think about putting it in sequential order? Like each level is its own thing and you have to learn the new thing, and then songs get unlocked and then exercises get pushed to you. If we see anything that is happening in your playing that is an issue, like then you can exercise it more specifically, or theory video. Like he's like, Pat, I have thought about this as well. I've nearly thought about the exact same idea. And I was like, no way. And he's like, yeah. And I think we can use generative AI as the way that we make our music, the way that we write the music, and we can have it be dynamic and personalized at that point to the user. And I was like, what? So my core idea was kind of the MVP, the minimum viable product, which is just the basics, right? Just here's a sight reading trainer. We're going to write every single phrase that is in MuseFlow, and then we're going to put it out into the world and see if people like it, right? So we did that for Unit 1 and started catching on. And so we were like, this is amazing. Okay, great. How do we scale it? Well, then it's his idea. It's the AI, the generative AI and we've got some algorithms that are running right now that are writing the music for Unit 2 that we're going to then cull through and hand pick all the ones that are going to then go into Unit 2. Okay. So it's just expediting the process for him when it comes to writing the music itself, because he's the one that wrote every single phrase for Unit 1, which is a lot. That's a lot of phrases. God, I don't even know how many hours. I think over 50 or 60 hours of music in total, at 72 beats per minute. It's over 10,000 phrases that he wrote. It's a lot. So Unit 2 would be exponential. Because we need, and it doesn't matter. But what was my point? What was your question? What was your?
Well, my original question was, did this happen in stages? This realization of what you're really doing.
Yeah,
and you were responding that, it happened in stages, but it seemed like both of you were kind of coming into the same core of understanding this.
Which I think we're really lucky that way. We're both very we intellectualize a lot. We philosophize a lot. And then I'm the one that actually puts all of this into practice. And it was kind of based on the way that I taught myself how to play. And he brought in the scaling ability, in making sure that we can actually do this type of curriculum at scale, for multiple instruments. It would be the generative AI that would need to write that music, and then we hand pick the ones that go into there or massage them, like adjust a specific note here and there, right? So this was a very like symbiotic, very, very collaborative process, me and Steven's discussions. We ended up talking for like, God, I think in total 50 hours about MuseFlow. Just we spent 4 to 6 hour sessions just discussing MuseFlow, and we recorded all of them. And so you can, I went back and I listened to like the beginning of those conversations and the end of those conversations. Yeah, we grew so much just through dialogue. It was what is a very rudimentary idea turned into an incredibly complex ecosystem of features that all kind of fed into each other and built on top of one another. And then we kind of just, okay, well, why does this work? Or why should this work? Right? Okay, why should this work? Okay. And then we started looking into the science behind flow state and positive psychology and gamification. And then we started learning Suzuki methods and different types of actual methods of, what is that? Teacher-student relationships and, positive reinforcements. We really just started getting into other types of methodologies of teaching and all these different kind of rogue, on the fringe types of learning. And we realized that like none of this is going to work for one specific, like everybody has a different way of learning. Everybody does. And so if we're able to kind of just capture a lot of more people because of the way that we're teaching, then that 85% drop off is going to lower. It's going to lower because more people are interested in playing music. And of course, we believe that music performance and music education is kind of integral to a healthy and happy society. But yeah, it was very cumulative. It was we built it, we realized it works, and then we kind of retroactively justified why it works with the science. And then, of course, user feedback was huge. They're the ones that drilled down into the core of like, well, this is working because of this. They were the ones that told us this is working because it's engaging me in this way. And we were like, that's amazing. That's so helpful. Being able to hear somebody else describe why it's working.
Yes, I mean that. Let's go to that question. Since rolling out, your first edition or first iteration, your MVP model, to where you are today, is the app showing success? Not necessarily from people feedback, but like from what you're seeing in the metrics, is it showing that people are elevating, and the same, say, user ID is now, in stage 4, and they were in stage, and that's what you look at, you're like, oh my God, joy, because this person now can play, right? What are you seeing there? What are you seeing behind the scenes?
We usually see, and I love seeing the data. I'm utterly obsessed with it. It's so cool to watch a new user come on, doing their free trial. It's 14 days. And so we really give them an ample amount of time to really figure out if they like it or not, right? We see them immediately go from level 0 all the way to some sort of plateau. They play every level in sequence, and it takes them 5-10 minutes, right? Because they're getting it really, really fast. They already know these skills. They're already able to play these levels. And so they get up to a point, let's say level 10, right? And then they play level 10 for a while. You see them playing it for like 45 minutes, or you see them playing it for a little bit longer. It really does range. It's like they shoot up to a certain level, and then they play that level for a certain duration, and then they scooch up, right? They go to the next level, and then they play that for a certain duration, and then they go up to the next level, play that for a certain duration. And you see this stair step happening. So the first shoot up, then a slight plateau, increase, plateau, increase, and it's just slowly stair stepping their way upwards. That is the general trend. People are getting better. And we've heard from users that there's this thing that happens, this confidence that occurs when they're able to just see music, a song out in the real world, and then they can just play it. There is a type of confidence that comes from that. And it's very specific to MuseFlow users. And they're talking about it. And they're telling us like, it is, nothing's ever done this to me before. Nothing's ever been able to do this to me before. Because I was just learning song after song after song. I could only play those songs. Now, because of your program, I can go out in the real world and see a song, and I can actually play it now. That's, and so they're very grateful.
The freedom.
That's the freedom.
That's the freedom I was talking about.
That's also proficiency. That's fluency. Music is a language at the end of the day, right?
Yes.
And so if you can read it and you can play it and you can express your emotions through it, you're golden, man. You're fluent at that point.
You're right. And for listeners who aren't musically inclined, I'm going to give you an example. Imagine you're a native English speaker, and now you've gone and learned 35 complete sentences in Japanese, and you pronounce them perfectly. Nobody could even tell you're not Japanese by saying them because you've parroted it perfectly. You have everything down. You go to Tokyo. If a conversation should happen outside of these 35 sentences that you've memorized, it is as if you don't know any Japanese. But by the token of those 35 sentences, if you just spurted them out one after the other for 35 sentences in a row, people say, oh, he's fluent in Japanese. But you don't know anything beyond this. So if a sentence or a word gets even, replaced, it may throw you off before you catch on to what it means. But now imagine you've learned the language, you've learned Japanese, you've learned your ABCs, and you've grown to learn the language, and you are even at 25 or 30% proficiency or fluency. You actually have more capacity to get around Tokyo with your 35% proficiency than your 100% proficiency in only 35 sentences.
100%.
So what MuseFlow is really doing is giving you that ability to go out as a average person and say, I'm starting to learn music, but I'm not really proficient. But then you go out there and you listen to something and you're like, oh, I get it. And then you can play it. And why? Because you have that minimal level that can allow you this freedom to now grow. It's up to you thereafter to get from that 35% of, that Japanese understanding of the language to say 90 or 50 or 70, wherever you put the effort in to get to, right? But at least you're starting off with an understanding of the language as opposed to a memorization of those 35 sentences. So,
Yep, exactly. And then you get into the world of like the nuances of everything, Number one, how do you want to express yourself with that language? Mm-hmm. And then you get into even more nuance of idioms and grammar and expression, like exclamation points and commas and periods. What does that mean to you in the context of that specific piece? A forte can mean a different thing, can mean a very different volume in one song than another song. An exclamation point can mean a very different thing in one sentence versus another sentence. It depends on how the person talks. It depends on if it's in dialogue or if it's in narration, Music is a language and it's all, you learn it the same way. I find it utterly fascinating, the parallels between language learning and music learning, And as we know, full immersion is kind of the way to learn a language. You go to the country, you stay there for 3 or 4 months, you end up really learning that language so much better than if you were to just sit down at a desk with a class here in America or wherever you are. It's so much better for full immersion.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure. And you know what? Speaking of language and music combined in that sense, so I'll give you something shocking. So I recently found out that about a little over 80% of Muslims don't speak Arabic. And the Holy Book, the Quran, yes, it is so interesting. And the Holy Book, the Quran, is in Arabic. And they have these tournaments, right? Because the Quran is kind of like, it's not read like a book. It's kind of poetic, it's musical in a sense, and there's this this oration and this narration that goes with it, and it's kind of musical. And they have these tournaments for the best reading of the Quran, right? And you'll see people from all over the world. You'll see them from Indonesia. You'll see them from, say, Montenegro. You'll see them from Albania, and you'll see them from Africa and from, South America, all parts of the world. These young people come and they, contestants, and they start reading, and whoever reads the best wins. Now, a lot of these people, they memorize the Quran, right? They actually memorize it by sound. You speak with them in Arabic, they won't be able to speak with you. They don't know the language, but they have memorized an entire book of 604 pages by sound. Like everything perfectly by sound. And the judges are native Arab speakers who also know the Quran inside out, but have the freedom of understanding what they're saying and reading and everything else. Imagine the power in your mind to memorize this much data to the literal sound of every millisecond that goes by, because it is by the like an error is not people don't understand that an error in music is not a 6-second thing that you did wrong. It's like, oops, no, it's a millisecond and an error shows up in the music. So to recite the Quran perfectly as that music of, 604 pages worth of music is ridiculous. So I've met some of those people because I was really fascinated. I went and met some of those contestants, and you have to speak English or, their native tongue or something like that with them because they don't speak a word of Arabic.
That's so funny.
And so you never understand your holy book as a religion, right? You never understand your holy book. You really only parrot it in a sense. And then it's kind of like, okay, now you go back, a few hundred years. It was the same thing with the Bible because people couldn't read. And it was really the priest who then commanded what the Bible says.
Right.
I take that further, and I actually wrote about this in one of my books. With music, it's the same as that church moment or that Islamic moment and all of those that shaped society. If you don't understand the music, you will never be able to hear it, and you'll never understand the expression, and you'll never be able to respond to it. So when we connect, you use that word, you said, why do we play music? To connect. But to connect, you need two people. You can't singularly connect, right? Otherwise, it's kind of like imposing. It's a rape, so to speak, because you're forcing yourself onto another person. Whereas connection is the willingness of two. But for me to will to connect with you, when you play me a song, I have to appreciate and understand your song. Yes, it will be beautiful for me. Like, oh, Patrick made me a song. Yay. And oh, it's so beautiful. He's playing it for me. Do I understand what he's saying? No. Do I understand the story he's telling in that song? No. Do I understand the song was about the time we met, on the podcast? No. I don't understand anything. I just want to romanticize whatever I want to because that's kind of, what I'm feeling at that moment. But that's not the reality of the expression and the connection. The connection Pat's trying to make is telling that story of when we met on the podcast. I need to be able to appreciate and connect. So even in that holy version of music, even all of those things, which is why the indigenous communities, they share their stories generationally through music and chant. They don't have a written book. If you go into their histories and cultures, there's not one written word that's saved and passed on generationally. It's all through chant, right? And when you think about it, the reason it stays and no millisecond changes in the chant and, for over 2 millennia, the song is still the same and the teachings are still consistent and nothing has changed is because every generation was taught to understand the chant and the music and not just to mimic it down. Because by mimicry, one person makes that millisecond mistake, it becomes a 2 millisecond mistake later, and then all of a sudden the song's changed altogether, right? The rhythm is completely gone to something else. So it's really what you're doing, and I can't emphasize this enough, what you're doing in allowing people to be able to connect and receive that expression and to re-express themselves in that way is the genius for me in this. It's not just learning I couldn't learn the piano because this mimicry didn't work for me or my teacher was bad. I'm going to try MuseFlow. That doesn't do it for me. What does it for me is you have broken through in a way that is allowing people to understand. Again, I can't give you enough examples. Going to the ballet, some people are there, all of a sudden some moves are happening and tears are rolling down their faces. You look to your right and your left and you're like, why are these people crying? What happened on stage that I missed? And then you're looking for someone being injured or hurt because you don't understand ballet. So you're looking for some catastrophe on stage that made these people cry. And you're like, I didn't get it. What happened? And then you nudge someone, you're like, why are you crying? What happened? They have to explain the story to you. So you need a translator. Music is like that. If you are not connecting and you need a translator, it's because you didn't study it right. What you're bringing to the table is that evolution, is that activism for me. And that is what really, makes me want you here and want to spread this as much as I can.
I appreciate it, man. I think that's really interesting. I love that you're referencing activism. I find that utterly fascinating because I think we're saying the same thing when it can be a radical thing that you're doing by playing a song that is either politically charged or socioeconomically charged, and it's telling a message that is not meant for the status quo. You're saying, let's change something. The message there is a bit of an activist statement. Music can be that vehicle. The goal with music at the end of the day, though, is to, at least in my opinion, a lot of the goal of music, when you have heard a symphony, right? Beethoven's Fifth or whatever, you don't necessarily know the intent of the author. You don't, but you're hearing it and you're feeling it. More importantly, if the player or the players at that point, the conductor of the orchestra who is playing the orchestra, if their intent can be delivered through the music, if the message of the piece, if you don't know what the intent of the author is, if the message of the piece is still being translated to you through an auditory experience from the player to the audience, then we have succeeded. There are so many times when I'm playing at my piano bar that I'll play a song that I'm deeply passionate about, that I absolutely love. Somebody gave me a request for I Am Lovin' You by the Avett Brothers or Helplessness Blues by Fleet Foxes. And I'm like, nobody ever requests these songs. And I love these songs. They're quite beautiful. And the messaging specifically is really where it's at for me, right? The meaning of the song. If I can translate that meaning to the crowd without them have ever hearing that song before, this is the first time that they've actually heard that song through the words I'm singing and through what I'm playing. If I can translate that idea to them, I have succeeded. That's ultimately the goal of music, is to be able to affect the other person emotionally, because music is the language of emotion at the end of the day. And so if we're able to translate that idea without them ever hearing the song before, we have succeeded. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the audience needs to have fluency in music. It doesn't. Music can be, it's a crazy translator like that. Like, you don't need to have fluency in the language to be able to understand the meaning of a piece. I find that actually really, really cool. I don't know if there's another language that can do that. I think music.
You need to know the language.
You need to know the language, right?
Right.
Yeah,
and the thing is, you know what it is? To me, it's a little bit. I have a friend, and they work with animals a lot, and they once said music is very, for them, they were saying music is very similar for me to how I understand dogs understanding me, in the sense
that that's awesome.
The dog doesn't speak English, cannot retain English, but yet we have this understanding of, it's not just the sit in the stand, but just through my, the way I speak, when my pitch is higher, lower, people do this all the time. Anybody who has a pet will know they have different pitches when they speak to their animals, right? It's like when they say, do you want to go for a walk? They don't say it like that. They don't say, do you want to go for a walk? Nobody says that to their dog. It's this excited, high pitch.
You want to go for a walk?
The dog,
you want to go for a walk?
Exactly. And you repeat it and the dog goes crazy and the house is in chaos all of a sudden. And that's the excitement it builds. How does that happen? That happens through that music that the dog understands, right? The dog hears that music. It hears this frequency. It's like, ooh, the song that I love is on, right? I'm going to get up and dance, right? That's what the song's getting. And it's the same thing for us.
So
music
true.
does that in that unidirectional way that, it's like, ooh, my song's up. And I get up and I start dancing. Or, oh, I remember this song because it triggers something, or it's that real connection in that sense. So it has that ability to be unidirectional in the sense of connecting, is that you're impacting another to go through their emotions by what you're presenting them, which no other language can do. Because if I start speaking French with you right now and you don't speak French, this conversation's over, because you're like, what did you say? I didn't get any of that. Even if my pitch is high, my pitch is low, you're like, all I know is maybe you're frustrated, but that's all I know. I don't even know about what.
Right.
But the beauty of music is that goes that far.
Fun. Okay, so fun little story. I was in Amsterdam for my honeymoon in September, and we listened.
Congratulations.
We decided. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And we decided, without knowing a lick of Dutch, to put on Dutch TV. We decided to do this late at night one night. It was terrible jet lag. We were like, okay, let's try some Dutch TV. And so we put that on. We were able to understand it pretty thoroughly. We didn't get the nuance of the actual, like, exactly what they were saying. But by all the nonverbals, all of the way, the musicality of their language, how they were saying it, the how and the why, right? We understood that, which was crazy. We understood the how and the why. Here's what we learned. There's one person that's selling an antique heirloom to 4 or 5 different investors, somebody that wants to buy that for their collection. Collectors, not investors. And they put it on a pedestal and they say, here's the thing. This is what my family history, my family story, some B-roll of like the countryside or like an old photo from the family shows up on screen and we see that. And then we go back to a close-up of the actual item itself. Maybe it's an old vase or something like that. That's very beautiful, like a mosaic of a vase or something like that, right? And so then there are these collectors, and they go one by one saying if they want to bid on it or if they don't want to bid on it. If they don't want to bid on it, they're out. If they want to bid on it, then they go do one-on-ones with the person who is selling the item and the collector. We go on into their office and we see a one-on-one with them. Okay. They have a conversation and they're debating on the import of this piece. And then they're also debating price. And if they can't align on either of those things, then they're out, right? Of course, the collector has an idea of what they want, right? Price wise. And of course, the seller has what they want, price wise. And usually that first conversation, they're out, right? They are misaligned and so they leave, right? Next one or the next one after that, either we have another one that leaves or the next one, you see the negotiation process occurring. They're talking money and then they're talking external things too. I think one person ended up throwing in tickets to a football game, ended up throwing in tickets to a football game on top of their base price for this heirloom. I'm almost positive that happened because they weren't agreeing on a number. And then the collector said something that was like, well, how about this? Like they said it in that terms. They were like, they said it with that lilt, right? They were like, well, what if I threw on top? What if I added in this? And it sounded like football because it's Dutch. Like you kind of can hear like kind of what it was all about. Football. Like you heard a little bit of that. And then you heard a price, how much those tickets are worth. And then you heard, I think, the name of the team, but I couldn't catch that.
Right.
Anyway, they agreed on it. They agreed. They said, yes. Okay, there you go. So they ended up selling the heirloom to this collector for the price and the tickets. It's wild to me that I picked up on that much of the conversation through not even knowing the language. It was all through nonverbals and context clues. That's what it was all about. Language isn't just words. Okay.
Right. It's the pitches give away so much.
Pitches, it's the meaning behind the words. If you're emotionally intuitive and you can actually like feel what they're feeling or at least recognize what they're feeling when they're expressing themselves through these words. And of course, it depends on the person too. Like, are they guarded? Are they emotionally guarded? Or are they just an open book? Right? It totally depends on the person. And so it's just wild that even without knowing a language, you can still get so much, you know?
No, for sure. I totally, I'm all for that because I see it all the time. I see it all the time. Like even in my own life, traveling, I'd get to places where there's no way we're communicating through language. So it's all sounds and, finger pointing and shapes. And it's like you're playing charades, And so, but then,
charades, right.
people are understanding each other somehow, you're in the middle of a village and people are surrounded surrounding, and you're trying to explain something. They're all trying to figure out what it is. And then you hear them speaking among themselves. And that's what he's trying to say. And then one person shows you water. He's like, you want water? You're like, and then you're like, no. And then the other one says, see, I told you he didn't want water, but I don't know. I don't speak that language, but I know he said that to him, So, yeah, 100%.
I love that.
100%. Now,
when there's a will, there's a way, like if there's
exactly.
Go on. Sorry, please.
Exactly. That's what it comes down to. Like, and I think that's what you're building here. You're facilitating the will's way, essentially. Now, I want to ask you about
I like that.
the gamification, because you bring that into the core of your work as well. Do you think that's the future of learning, in a sense? Is it something that, because when we started this conversation, when I spoke about how piano learning for me was positive reinforcement, it triggered you to say it wasn't for me, because it automatically took you back into your history, and you're like, I got grounded, it was the worst because I had to do all those things. So now I think that trauma, so to speak, of learning music for you has kind of come out and said, I'm not going to force people to, for example, if you don't hit these notes, if you don't do this, if you don't finish these courses, you have to pay $10 extra. That's your punishment. You didn't go about it that way, right? That would have been you imposing your trauma, right? That would have been you saying, that's how I learned. So now you're going to pay, or, you're going to, I don't know, have no internet for 45 minutes because, you didn't do your lesson right. But instead,
there's a monetary punishment for messing up.
Monetary punishment for messing up. And I have your credit card. You didn't do that. You turned around and you tried to find.
You're captive here. Yeah.
Yeah. You turned around and you tried to find a way that makes this fun for people. And I think that kind of grows from the way that you realized you never want anybody to learn music the way you had to learn music. So in a sense, originally, the gamification may have, spurted from there. So tell me, how did this come about for you?
I think the future of education in general is going to become more personalized to the learner. There's so many different ways that people learn nowadays. We've recognized that there are just so many more ways than sitting down at a desk and being lectured by a teacher, or by reading from a book and then digesting that information and then regurgitating it on a test. There are so many different ways to learn. We've already recognized this. This was research that was done in the 80s and the 70s. But now we're finally putting it into practice, okay? Because our education system is just so archaic. It's hard to include.
Even our revolutions in our education systems are archaic, because people are like, oh, the Montessori system. I'm like, dude, the Montessori was not a 15-year-old discovery. Like, this is ancient, but our systems are so archaic that it makes the Montessori system novel, so to speak. That's how archaic education is formally.
Yeah. So I wonder how this, if there's going to be a revolution, I wonder if it's going to be a slow journey into progress. I'm curious how it's going to go. Ultimately, though, what it comes down to is I want, and I think every educator wants, more people to simply learn. Okay. Mm-hmm. I think lifelong learning is very important. I think it keeps our brains agile. It keeps us interested in our lives, and it keeps us exploring things that are new. And humans always need a frontier to kind of push through. We always need that. And so what can be your frontier? What is that next thing that you're always striving for? Well, if it's music education, then it's music education, and that's great. We've decided to put that sort of internal motivation, the learning of the new skill, as the main thing. Okay. That is ultimately what the gamification is trying to work you to. Okay. Again, it's not an external sort of thing. It's this internal, aha, oh my gosh, I've actually learned it. I've actually learned it. So what we've realized is throughout the playing of a level, our users, and I've seen this multiple times, just it's beautiful actually. I'm on a Zoom call with one of them or something, and I'm seeing them and I'm like, go ahead, play where you're at. I'd love to watch you, right? And so I'm just this silent observer sitting there in a fly in the room, just watching them play. And they're playing, they're sharing their screen, they're playing. And it's difficult for them. And then something clicks. They're usually at like 75% accuracy, right? They're trying hard. That's difficult. If you're messing up 25% of the time, that's a lot of notes. Okay. So it's really difficult for them to do it. And then what they do is they lower the tempo. And then they're playing at 95% accuracy. And then they increase the tempo. They're at 85% accuracy. And then they're at 95% accuracy. And then they increase the tempo again. And now they're at the goal tempo. And they're playing 95% accuracy. And then they're saying, oh my gosh, I'm getting it. I'm actually feeling something clicks at that moment where it's a flip of a switch. And then they can just play it. Then they can play it. And then they go in and go in. Oh my God, I'm getting it. I'm getting it. I'm actually getting it. Boom. They pass the level. Big old dopamine hit happens. And then you move on to the next level. So the goal here is the acquisition of knowledge. That's the game. We're adding game elements on top of this it's always going to be the goal of, did you learn the skill? That's always going to be the goal. It's not, well, are we going through a narrative here, like a video game or something like that, right? You know, there's a campaign mode and then there's open world mode and there's always like a narrative that you're trying to drive towards. It's not necessarily narratively driven, no. Nor is it badges or stars or externally motivated, no. This is, have you learned the skill? And then if so, we're going to move you on, you know. I think that's kind of the difference between traditional gamification and our type of gamification. It's facilitating the acquisition of knowledge.
Right.
You know,
the bottom goal is still true to the essence of what brings the person to that purpose. So, you know, when you think of, for example, Candy Crush as a game, there is no internal intrinsic benefit for you to continue playing this game to, you know, the 2,000 levels that there are, because you don't leave having this acquisition of a new skill or anything else. I mean, you're not better at martial arts at this point. You're not better at driving. You don't kick a ball better. Nothing happens better because you finished Candy Crush, right? But here, what you're doing is you're staying true to the essence of music, in the sense that you pass all the levels at MuseFlow and you will be a great pianist, for example, right? I mean, that's the point. That the skill is the determinant factor at the end of the day. Now, before I let you go, I asked this of all the guests because I like hearing different people's opinions on how they would tackle this. Just short sentence or two. Imagine you're the most powerful person on earth, not in dominance or, you know, dictatorship, but moral influence. What is the first action you take to ignite a global shift toward planetary harmony?
At the end of the day, we're all human. I think if we can somehow instill that understanding into every culture, regardless of culture, regardless of race, regardless of gender, language, whatever it may be, at the end of the day, we are still human and we all need to come together to make this planet better. It's an unfortunate thing that, you know, we are this difficulty in trying to figure out how do we move forward, right? It's a shame. It's not a shame. It's just hard to say, if there's just one rogue person that is greedy, if there's one person that is taking more than they need, then we're screwed. It's trying to instill that understanding that we are all in this together and we all kind of have to move forward together as one for us to come out in the end.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Patrick Boylan, for joining us on Compassiviste Dialogues. Music is more than an art form. It's a pathway to social connection, expression, and what you just hinted to, coming together by re-engineering how people learn, you're helping re-engineer how they relate to creativity and to one another. And really, like I keep saying, the compassion and the activism that you bring through the way music can be that language that you express what you would do for planetary harmony is what also makes you, a natural compassiviste, because, what a compassiviste is a person who acts by the moral guidance of compassion first. And what you just said in your last sentence, and what you're doing in your work is essentially that. You're essentially trying to give people this, extra layer of language and an added language for them to speak at such a higher level with each other and influence each other and express and have that real beauty of what art does. And behind every revolution of every type, your spiritual revolution, your national revolution, your inner self revolution, the way you eat, the way you revolt against your bad dieting, whatever it may be, that requires expression and art at its core to start that revolution. So, you're allowing people to have the musical ability to implement that change within themselves and outwardly through their expression to the world. And hopefully, in the flip side, for the world to also receive this expression and understand it by them also collectively learning the music. So thank you for everything you're doing. To our audience, please subscribe. Oh, you're welcome. We're more than welcome. Please subscribe to Compassiviste Dialogues. Share this episode so I can bring you more people like Patrick Boylan and amazing stories from around the world. Explore the links for Patrick's MuseFlow, which is MuseFlow, MuseFlow.ai, and Compassiviste. Follow us on our social media. We're here to help change the world together. I'm Ali Horia.